click through some of these kind of quickly. I know some of you attended the presentation that was given by MGT. It's about an hour total, and I'm not going to take that long. So I'm just going to click through some of this stuff really quick. The demographics. Yep, we're growing. Keep going. Yep. Okay, so this is just an overview of Alpine School District. We have 92 schools, 60 elementaries, 14 middles and junior highs, 10 high schools, 1 alternative high school, and then 7 special program schools. So you can see some of the demographics, like, oh, look at those gaps for like Lake Mountain and Frontier Middle. Those are some pretty big boundaries. And I love how when it like is bigger than the lake for Cedar Valley High School, the boundaries for that high school. So Eagle Mountain's 52 square miles. So it's a lot of ground that we cover. So just to kind of give you guys the kind of considerations about, there's challenges in managing a district of our size. We're 36th in the nation as far as student enrollment. So we're considerably large. We want to make sure that if there is a split, that it's well executed, and that there's concerns about the impact on taxation. So these were the considerations that the company took into consideration as they were looking at information. The duplication of services and administrative overhead, asset allocation. The district is well run. They were generally very complimentary, and that we do have a streamlined administrative process. Obviously, we face a lot of overcrowding in our area. Other areas where we're very focused on neighborhood schools, particularly in the Orem area. There are significant employee concerns that we need to be very cognizant of. And then just the dynamic of a rising tide lifts all boats, that there are some areas that may be facing decline or growth, and that when we kind of balance those things, it's a good thing. We want to take into consideration our special needs students as a significant one for us, making sure that their needs are met through their IEPs, making sure that we have equitable allocation. Representation and local control is one I'll touch on later. It's one of the key considerations I think we should be having a conversation about. And then just there is a complexity and a specific timeline. We have a wider pool of resources. There are economies of scale that we enjoy. We also have a lot of collaboration through things like CTE, our career and technical education, STEM, extracurriculars. Also that we have significant shared assets. So one of the things they're looking at is funding, where we are currently, what it will look like in the future. There are challenges and disruptions that could occur. There are dynamics in each city that are very unique. Obviously, Saratoga is very different from PG, very different from Cedar Hills. And then just looking at what the divisions would look like if we pursued that. I'm going to flip through this till we get to the Saratoga part. So better representation, local control, we need funding, we have overcrowded schools, and then just making sure that we're looking into the future and our facility needs ongoing. So this is probably one of the most important slides people need to pay attention to when we consider a split, is where does the money come from? Education funding in Utah is incredibly complicated. This is the really basic version of it. Roughly 64% comes from what's called the weighted pupil unit, or the WPU, which basically means the bucket of money attached to every kid. 23% comes from property taxes, about 10% is federal, and then 2% is other. There are cell towers at some of our schools, and they do receive funding for things like that. Lake Mountain has one. Yeah, Lake Mountain has one. Riverview's got one. So then this is just a dynamic showing expenses, our district expenses. As far as the amount of money, 78 cents of every dollar ends up in the classroom. And then roughly 22 cents is through central services. That's things like transportation, making sure that we're supplying all those things. So we try to get as much funding. That's a very good number. It's very aggressive. So I'll go through the basic 6 options really quick so you guys can see them. And actually, I'll probably only go for the first 3 because those are the only ones that really are different for us. So the first one basically shows Alpine staying together. You'll notice that there's roughly a $13 million surplus if we do that. And then if we would need to go for increments for a $200 million bond, it would look like roughly $70 of an increase annually. And I want to clarify that that is annually, not monthly, for the average home in Alpine School District. So that just kind of gives you a picture of where we would be.
Julie,
and then,
can you ask questions?
Yeah, you can ask. I'll just keep talking until you interrupt me, Chris.
Can you stop talking for?
I guess.
Can you go back to that slide? If there's, I just want clarification on this because you have the same information on the other slides for the other options. When there's a surplus and you do a $200 million bond, could that servicing that bond not be absorbed by the surplus?
It could to a certain extent. I mean, you do want to have some surplus. You don't want to run on like a net zero dynamic because you need some funding. Like you guys all get this. You need a little bit of set aside for emergency or sewer issues.
We have it.
Yeah, you've got it. But a portion of a surplus, particularly in the slides where it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, absolutely could be used to fund a bond instead of doing insurance.
Do you know and this is maybe a number you don't have, on a $200 million bond, what is the service on that annually?
Are you asking me what the interest rate
No, what's
is?
the payment on that?
We looked at 175 million and it was 12.6 million a
Okay.
year. So I would say 13 and some change probably.
Estimated
Oh,
annual-
14.4. Yeah. 14.4 is the annual payment.
Oh, okay.
14.4 million a year for 20 years.
So
Yeah.
the surplus couldn't cover. You need to keep the surplus and.
Well, but surplus, you could pay down your debt.
So.
Yeah.
when we
So
talk
like you
about
maybe
that-
would have to do 2.53 increments, or maybe 1.5. Yeah.
And that's a GO bond?
Yeah,
Typically?
it's a GO bond. Yeah, so lease revenue bonds are typically a little bit higher in their percentage rates. But when we did a lease revenue bond last year for the build of the middle school in Eagle Mountain, we got a really aggressive rate. Alpine has a AAA, helps us a lot.
Okay.
Julie, what would our bond rating, do we have any idea what our bond rating would look like, depending on the splits that we took? Is there any financial indicators that would give us an early indicator?
So we generally go through Moody's and Fitch to get our bond ratings. One of the challenges is that, they look at longevity. So we would be just like a credit rating for an individual, right? Like we would be dinged as far as we don't have a long credit history as a new district. But the fact that we do have a surplus, that we're a growing district, those things would all work in our favor. There are some outside factors that could impact it, like SB 86 that passed this legislative session. We're significantly concerned about what the credit, how that will affect the credit rating by having that lease revenue cap. Also, I think it was HB 173 that was run and it didn't pass, but that one that took anything that we did in truth taxation and put it back to the voters. Anything that looks at like your ability to meet those payments kind of ends up in the negative. Some of those things are outside of our control.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is because, through insurance, we could get up to a AAA rating with some sort of insurance or rating modifier. But to that point, I think we probably need to consider that we wouldn't be eligible for the AAA rating. And
Right.
we should be looking at maybe
A little bit higher.
Double A rating.
Yeah.
Double A rating qualified bonds is probably pretty realistic, perhaps. But that with some insurance probably makes it doable. But that would just be the only thing I'd point out on that one.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid point. And just so that you're aware, the $200 million payment that was thrown out there as an option because of the $200 million bond is roughly what it would cost to build a high school. Our projections are between 150 and 200 million for a new high school. I know that's absurd. It's also just what it costs.
So I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
We talked, I think you alluded to it, the fact that we'll be able to have buying power with the two districts where buses, things like that. So we're going to we do that with our police cars and things. We try and buy with cooperative agreements. I noticed that there was one, and I can't remember the official term, but like where the troubled students, the special school that they go to.
An alternative high school?
Yeah, we have one alternative high school in Alpine School District. It doesn't make sense to now have a alternative high school because that was meeting the entire school district, the one. Is there talk of sharing that between the two districts?
Yeah, so a lot of different options. We could do shared service, and we do these different districts all the time. Like, for example, Provo has an agreement with us where they do the majority of their purchasing and warehousing through ASD.
They're wanting to.
It gets them a better price. We get to charge them a little bit. Everybody walks away in a win-win situation. There's also a group of students in Draper that we take into Alpine School District because our side of the mountain going up to
on
Draper
above Alpine,
is
yeah.
not as steep as the canyon section. So we do MOUs. Do I think it's possible to do that for purchasing and warehousing to maintain economies of scale? Absolutely. I don't think it would be productive for every service, like transportation, for example, where we're having a shortage of bus drivers. That would not be productive, but do I think purchasing, do I think that we would look at a contract with, hey, wherever the alternative high school is, do we just pay a fee for students to receive services there? Absolutely. We would not have to duplicate everything.
That's where a lot of people have concern is we're duplicating unnecessary efforts. And so I think that would
Yeah.
be great. Yeah.
And to your point too, even with staff, I've heard, people say, oh, it's going to be a doubling of admin. That's not correct. Well, we have to have a superintendent, a BA, a school board, absolutely. And there are costs associated with that. But for example, we have 3 secondary supervisors. We would probably be fine with 1. We have 5 elementary supervisors. We need 2 to 3. So we would not be replicating everything. We would, reduce.
We'd be
Yeah.
reallocating.
And ASD, as it remains, if the split happens, would also reduce though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those are key considerations to pay attention to.
Reallocating resources.
Yeah.
So this just shows a little bit of like what our enrollment is currently in ASD, about 84,000 kids, and 10-year projections are at 92,000. The adjustable taxable value right now is 49 billion. It would go up to 150 billion. So that just gives you a little bit. And then they're showing the 85 schools, and then of course the 7 specialty schools. They have not mapped those out, but we know that like they're, like for example, we have a specialty school here in Saratoga.
We do, yeah.
Okay, so option 2, this is basically an east-west split. So it's a 2-district split. This is the west side being Lehigh, Saratoga, Eagle Mountain, Cedar Fort, and Fairfield. You can see our enrollment would be about 43,000. And this is just a snapshot of today. That's not what it'll look like next year because we all know that we're going to have more kids in the fall. With roughly a $36 million surplus, which once again, as we're talking about that annual payment, can we make that annual payment in cash from that $36 million surplus and not have to do any increments? The answer to that is yes. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's what a future board would do, but is it possible to do that with current funding? It is. And then increments would would generate about $2.3 million for every increment that's generated for a tax.
And it's $100 more a year per family.
Right, so 100, and that's with the assumption that we would take all the increments to do a $200 million bond, which I don't think would happen because of the surplus. But yeah, it would be
It's 100.
172 divided by 12. So
Okay, but how, so let's take option 2 as a hypothetical.
yeah,
Lehigh West would assume debt
yes,
with the split, but that debt would then be retired. Could you still use the same layering of bonds principal?
yeah. So basically, the way that ASD does bonds is that as we have brought on new debt, we've kind of layered them so that as new debt is brought on, old debt is paid off.
Right.
So for example, last year, we did 3 increments, but basically we were retiring 3 increments worth of debt. And so by filling in 3 increments of capital, it just kind of zeroed out. It's anticipated that we'll lose another 3 increments this year in debt. And then next year, I think it's 2. So we're to the point of where we're going to start seeing like a stair stepping where it's not 3 increments every year, it's 2 or 1. But yes, we could do a similar dynamic where we trade it out as debt is trading off. We bring in options for new funding, and then we're able to do cash. Can we flip to maybe building a middle or elementary school every other year, and then maybe just looking at bonding for secondary schools? Is there a way that we look at a more aggressive pay-as-you-go pattern?
Yeah, okay.
So those are kind of the basics for that one. The 2-district model, the west side, we'd start off at 43 and some change in enrollment, 10-year projections, just shy of 52,000. Our taxable value would go from 20 billion to 87 billion. I think we're all aware of how we were seeing significant commercial growth in Saratoga and Eagle Mountain, and I think we're going to see that kind of ticking up. Also, people ask a lot of times, why is there a significant difference between the West as far as the funding model? Huge piece of that is the number of schools. We have 38 schools, they have 47. Costs me about $1 million a year to keep an elementary open, regardless if it has 400 kids or 1,200 kids. So that's why you're seeing with us having larger schools, we are using definitely kind of economies of scale in our actual school system. And so we're able to do a little bit more and have a little bit more cash available. The last one I'm going to review, because I think this is the only other version that really separates out whether it's the district staying together or split. This is a west side configuration where Lehigh actually goes east, and the west side is solely Saratoga, Eagle Mountain, Cedar Fort, and Fairfield. So our enrollment would start off about 24,000. Our surplus would still be 27 million, so still pretty aggressive with our surplus. I want everyone to take a deep breath because I feel like everybody reads 13 increments and freaks out a little bit. Once again,
77 annual, yeah.
yeah, like what the, but once again, if you've got that $27 million surplus, you can essentially pay in cash your debt payment for a $200 million bond. The other thing is, like I said, that's based on a high school. Is there a model where we look at, once again, going in cash to elementary schools and just bonding for secondary schools and doing that, being a little bit more aggressive?
77.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the vote if you do that.
If I do 13 increments, I'm not going to give.
377 per, I mean, that's 70 to 170 to now 370?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, you don't have to take those increments. Right. And I think that's part of the consideration that we need to pay attention to is that's kind of assuming a worst case scenario. With the amount of surplus we've got, we would not need to take the full amount. And I think, could be a little bit more aggressive. So that's kind of the rest of the options generally just kind of outline all the other options outline, just a three-way configuration on the east side. But just to give you guys a little bit of a model, so this one's the one that excludes Lehigh, that Lehigh goes east. We start off at, once again, at 24,000 kids, end up about 30,000 in a 10-year projection. Our adjusted taxable value goes from $9 billion to $48 billion. So we're also seeing significant commercial growth. And as you guys, I'm sure, are very well aware, when it comes to property taxes, residential homes have a 45% abatement, essentially a waiver. And so basically they're only charged 55% of their taxable value while commercial is charged at 100%. So as we're seeing commercial growth, that will significantly impact the abilities of schools to meet needs in a very positive way.
Here, because they give all their, you guys give.
75%, RDA for the majority of Vineyard.
So, Julie, we had the discussion about planning for schools and growth with kids coming in. The state loves, the internal accessory dwelling units.
Right.
Have we approached the state on being able to have a tax on those? They're our business, and they bring in families and kids to schools.
Are we talking about impact fees?
No, impact fees would be great for school, but just a yearly tax. Like if you're $177 for a home, and I have 4 kids in my house, I throw in an IADU in my basement, now I have 8 kids, I'm still paying $144, whatever.
That's a great.
We need to tax IADUs for the impacts on school districts.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's probably under the same category as impact fees, or we'll have a really hard time convincing, but I'm completely on board with you on that one. I mean, we're seeing a significant impact.
Waiver, because it's become a business.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
50% of their home is now a business.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it would be an interesting thing if we can push it with the legislature.
Should be. Anyways, we need to look at that because your numbers that you shared with us in the school meeting, you're having a hard time accounting for kids moving into basement apartments for growth. They're chewing up the cost and the resources, but we're not gaining the increments that we would with a house.
Yeah, because basically, when things came in, right, there's an assumption that impact fee that the city charges, that there's going to be roughly whatever, 6 to 8 people living in a home. But when you've doubled that and now it's not 6 to 8 people, it's 16 people, there's a significant impact on the city resources, sewer, water, just like there's a significant impact on the school. So I think it'd be a really interesting idea if we could maybe coordinate with UCLT or ULCT, I can't.
Or even figure out what square
LCT.
footage became a business and at 100% tax rate.
Yeah.
It is a business, that's what it is.
Yeah, no, it's a great argument to make.
Huge argument.
Yeah.
Because they're we actually are requiring them to even license.
Yeah.
So a lot of the MGT studies were very focused on, the benefits of ASD staying together. Just want to clarify with you guys, there's kind of 5 reasons we've talked about for a district splitting. 3 of them the district has pushed significantly in previous conversations. 3 reasons to split are, first off, your finances are tanking. Ours aren't. ASD has strong financials, AAA bond rating, so that's not an issue. Second is if academics are tanking, once again, we just got ranked 5th in the nation in education in Utah. We generally outperform the state. We're always looking to improve, and we've got phenomenal teachers. Third reason is representation. We talked about this a little bit earlier with some of the feedback about representation. One of the challenges that we have in Saratoga is that because we're having such extensive growth, we're always underrepresented. So before the 2020 census, I represented all of Saratoga, Eagle Mountain, Cedar Fort, and Fairfield, represented 21 schools. So it's a significant load. And then after the census, we've added a board member since then to the west side. But we're still, I would argue, underrepresented because we're only doing this every 10 years when the census comes out. And when you are growing this fast, even from the census to when it was voted on in 2022, we were already underrepresented again.
Yeah, Mark, what's our population?
So, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. What's our population percent growth between the census and now?
We were looking at our growth trends, and we've been averaging over 10% since about around 10% since about 2015,
A year.
a year.
Right. So we went from like
A lot to.
30,000 to 60,000 since the census.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
So other school districts around the country that are quite large, they have more than 7 members of their school board. Basically, it's a school board member for every high school and then what feeds into that high school. How come that hasn't been considered, having it be a 9 or even 11 member board? And then you have the representation, because I'm looking at the numbers. I'll be honest. I'm sort of a believer in keeping it together because of the economies of scale. The $70 is a lot more appealing than $170 and a lot better than $300. And just working it so that you have a school board member per high school, then you have your 2 or 3 junior highs and then your 7 or 8 elementary schools going in, and then you'd have equal representation. Doing something like that is a lot more cost-effective and conservative in its nature than doing this split. In Florida, if we were Florida, the entire county is a school district. Sarasota, Florida County is one whole school district, the entire county. So they have 19 school districts in Florida, 19 counties. So Provo, Nebo, we'd all be just one big. So it's possible. Have really large school districts and are very successful in their economies of scale, and they have good test scores as well. So
you're looking at it, I think, predominantly through a financial lens. I think one of the challenges, our school board seats are determined just like a House seat or a Senate seat. It's based on, percentage of population. And you can only go within I think it's 3% above or below that dynamic. So when we were looking at redistricting school board seats, I said, hey, all the ones on the west side, we want the negative 3% as much as possible, knowing that, once again, we were going to be underrepresented. So one of the challenges, I think, with the 9-member board, with our representation, we have a split right now 4-3 east-west. And it's not showing, I think, the increase that we're seeing on the west side. And if we would expand of 9 board members, we would see a 5-4 split. So we might pick up 1 board member on the west side, but we pick up another one on the east side. And I don't think that solves the representation issue.
But you can caucus. It allows you more people. You're 4 now, 4-3. You can caucus together and you can try and pull someone. Just like I will do that sometimes. If I know it's going to be tight, I can talk to one of my council members and say, hey, this is why I'm feeling the way I am, and then you can caucus. And so it does give you the representation. It does, because now you're not dealing with as many schools. You're not representing as many schools. You're representing a smaller group. You can get to your high schools. You can get to your elementary schools and your junior highs. I just feel like it's become trendy to split, and it's become sort of cool, where it hasn't been very successful in the state. It hasn't. And Alpine School District has such great scores, has such powerful position. I don't understand why we want to give that up when we have power, we have influence. When Alpine School District talks to the state legislature, they really listen, because it's like a lobby. It's a big, powerful group. So I don't know. For me personally, I've told you this personally too, one-on-one. I just think that we really need to look at being maybe more creative in option 1 and staying together, and then expanding that representation and making it more effective.
I have a slightly different take. I think that the state legislature, if this doesn't happen, is going to come in with a hammer and smash Alpine School District.
So I addressed 3 of the reasons to split, right? Financial, academics, and representation. I've always argued there should be 2 more. So one of those is if a bond doesn't pass. That happened. I don't know we can ever pass another general obligation bond in Alpine School District, and that is significantly concerning, especially in the area we live in. The other thing that I would say that we need to look at is, are there inequities across the district, and are they being addressed? And my argument is, when you look at that $36 million surplus and $23 million deficit, I would argue that is an inequity that is not being addressed. And you know, you can see it differently. I totally appreciate it. I will also say another thing, like as you mentioned, the legislative piece. In the last 3 years, there have been bills either opened or run to split out. SB 86 was very much a punishment for ASD building a middle school in Eagle Mountain. I do think the legislature is going to come in and split the district if we do not. And
Do they have constitutional right to do that?
They give themselves that through the legislative process.
But the Constitution has them separate. It would be a lawsuit. There would be, you could easily win it in the state Supreme Court.
But
I'm just saying.
I think the east-west, though, shows 500-person schools. You had schools earmarked to close on the east side, and we kept them open while we're putting 1,300 and 1,400 kids in schools. They're sitting on the floor to eat lunch. You know, you could combine 2 of those, sell a new elementary, and build one.
But then we're still now paying for our schools at $170 versus, and we built the east side, and then now the east side is getting walk away.
I'm just saying, that vote is.
I will argue.
No, but now the east side's going to walk away.
I will argue there is more and more divisiveness about geography that I don't know is fixable. And I will say we are already delayed in building schools out here. I was supportive of us putting a bond out in 2020. I was outvoted 6-1 on that one, and it didn't come forward. The argument was, we'll just wait till 2022 because we were in the midst of COVID and see what happens, and it'll be better in 2022, and it wasn't.
And it didn't pass.
And the bond failed. So we were already 2 years behind, and then with the bond, not passing, with it failing, we're now 2 more years behind. And
Why did you not try and do it again this summer?
Why did we not so we can only bond in November for the ballot. Why did we not
But why did
bond?
you try for 2024? Because you failed in 2022.
We won't bond this year because if a district split is going forward, I feel like it's going to be the same question as Prop 2, which is it's going to muddy the waters and it's going to complicate the dynamics with us running a geo bond.
How is the current school board looking to fund the necessary growth that's required before this? Because you're 2 years away before a split will happen.
There was supposed to be a meeting tonight that was supposed to be held, that was canceled, that was supposed to be a resolution to some of that.
The east side killed it.
But you're 4-3. How did the east side kill it?
Majority vote is 4 on the
I
east.
know. I thought you
4 east
have
side.
4 east, 3 west. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
4 east, 3 west,
That's what I
yes.
said. Okay.
So you're here tonight because your meeting tonight was canceled
The east side.
by
killed
the east side where you were going to vote to
Build the Saratoga
a
Springs
new high school. Yeah.
Julie, one thing, this is a tale of 2 different areas, because one area is, they're going down in numbers. The west side, we're going up in numbers. So the handling of that inside the school district is different, right? I mean,
It's very complicated and emotional. I will tell you that it is never fun to change boundaries, and we change boundaries a lot out here to try and mitigate issues so that we don't have to build so many new schools. I will say the worst decision you ever make as a school board member is closing a school.
Right.
It's extremely emotional. A lot of people are very attached to their schools. They feel like schools are the anchors of their neighborhood, and I get it, right? I have 2 schools in my neighborhood. I understand what that looks like. At the same time, when we keep subsidizing small schools, there is a cost, and I would argue that the cost is shown in the deficit and the surplus. There's a specific cost to that, and right now, that cost is being incurred by our students.
yeah, I think I'm saying is, I feel for the split, because it is one is the strategy is growing, and how do we do that? The other one is, how do we handle the change in our declining numbers? So it's 2 different strategies that I see there.
Well, and one of the arguments for a 2-way split in particular is let the East resolve their issues with small schools. If they want to support small schools and raise taxes to support that, I completely support the East Side doing that. If that is that's their prerogative, if that's the way they want to move forward. And at the same time, should the West be looking at, let's solve the problem of growth? And should we focus on, instead of being a house divided, can we focus on everybody facing their
Right.
their large specific issue. And I think one of the things that we're going to see long-term, which you guys are all aware of, is we're going to be growing for the next 40 to 50 years. This is not something that is going away. At the same time, there's a dynamic where Vineyard is helping offset some of the decline in Orem, but we're also seeing significant declines in the Lone Peak and the PG areas. So
Let's be honest, Vineyard really isn't, because they gave up 75, your predecessors gave up 75% of the commercial property tax in.
Yeah, they're growing in.
they're growing in students.
They're growing in students,
Yeah.
but not growing it in revenue. So now it's non-taxable students. And they promised that they would build all the commercial. I was in the meeting before they build the housing, but how many condos do you see in Vineyard versus the commercial?
Yeah, well, we're having to look at, like, are we going to do a boundary change in Vineyard schools right now because of the growth?
Yep.
So, yeah.
It's so messy.
Julie, quick questions. One, can we sell Clear Creek and pay for the high school? Just, let's dump it. Sell Clear Creek, let's build the high school. Kids use that every day. Clear Creek, we use a handful of days a year and pay a lot for it, so let's sell it. And do we have to divide it by exactly city lines?
So it does need to be divided by municipal lines. We can't cross counties or cross cities. There was a whole proposal about should Lehigh get split in half, just like down I-15. Yeah, that's not legal. So it does need to stay along municipal lines. And
But the legislature could do it if they wanted to.
well,
You
They
just
won't.
said the legislator could do whatever they want.
code could change. Well, it changed this year in a positive way, but code could change next year.
I know we have students in Lehigh that attend Saratoga schools and vice versa, and Eagle Mountain, Saratoga. Are there other areas where, if option two is taken, would that affect would there be kids
From Lehigh, trying.
in Alpine that are going to Lehigh schools today that would have to make a choice?
So we do have out-of-area dynamics. Like, for example, I have a friend who lives in Highland. She lives about a half mile from the Lehigh border, but her kids go to Skyridge. So there would be dynamics where if there are lines drawn by municipality, like, for example, we have individuals in Saratoga who attend Dry Creek Elementary in Lehigh. So there would be shifts. We can always do out-of-boundary, and there is a protection for secondary students for 6 years, up to 6 years. They can attend the school, like if they were originally boundaried, for example, to
Okay.
like Lehigh, they could still attend to choose, Lehigh High School, even if it was in another district.
But even
Yes, there's a protection for 6 years.
Even shifting the Skyridge kids would help offset Lone Peak's decline.
Yes, you could argue that there
Not
would be some.
detrimental to the other district.
Right. Well, and it would be like there would be individual dynamics. Like, for example, there's about 30% of the kids in PG High come from Linden. If there was an Orem Vineyard Linden configuration, that potentially does have negative consequences for PG High. So we're trying to also be very cognizant of unintended consequences and what those would look like.
Okay.
How are lessons learned with canyons in Jordan?
So I know that's one that gets brought up constantly, right? That was so horrible, and that's the thing everybody kind of defers to. We've had multiple conversations with Jordan and Canyon's board members as well as staff saying, what would you have done differently? It's been fascinating having conversations with them. One of the biggest ones we heard about was just the data sharing, that the new school district starts on July 1. Like, that's kind of how it rolls. And that not until midnight of July 1 did Canyons get data about where students were. So they're trying to make sure that they've got enough teachers assigned to classrooms. And the biggest issue for them at the very beginning was special education bus routes, making sure that every special education student was picked up appropriately. They said they had staff probably for the first week riding buses just to make sure. So one of the things, I have a list on my phone. One of the things that I want to talk about is getting MOUs and contracts into place really early if a split does occur, so that we're data sharing early, that every teacher's step and lane, their retirement, every student's IEP, 504, behavior improvement plan, all those things get transferred early so that there's not this 6-week scramble. There's going to be complications. It's not going to be an easy dynamic if it does occur. I'm not going to pretend that it is. And it's probably going to take us a couple of years to figure out, did we overhire, did we underhire, just kind of get to that homeostasis.
Well, the financials, though, between Canyons and Jordan was a nightmare, because Jordan had all of the real estate value versus the Canyons, and so it was like an 80-20. Canyons was very, very poor, and Jordan was very, very rich.
Yeah, and we've tried to be very, like, you've seen the projections for what we think our taxable assessed value is going to go up to. And then we've tried to be very intentional. This bill that we worked on that passed this last session specifically assisted our kiddos who are special needs. That, for example, if there would be something like an Orem Vineyard Linden split, they don't have a special needs school in that area. So we made sure that in the bill, students for up to 5 years can access special needs schools in other areas while those new areas construct. So we're trying to be very intentional to make sure that we're putting kids and teachers at the forefront here. Does that mean that we're going to get everything 100% right? No, but we're trying to be we're trying not to be reactionary and emotional about this. We're trying to be very logistical and very kind of specific about making sure that we're looking at all those lenses and having conversation.
Can I say something now? You know, I do appreciate the comments around economies of scale and all that stuff, but I'm glad that the board has been thoughtful about the sharing and things like that to mitigate that. You know, in spite of me conservatively wanting to get economies of scale, we need to do what's best for the students. And unfortunately, we were held hostage by a city that starts with O, right, 2 years ago, and the bond didn't pass. And now we got a bunch of very crowded schools and then some that are not remotely crowded. And if we don't do something about that, is this going to continue for at least 10 years, probably longer? And so I appreciate the thoughtful approach. You know, I think you're stopped on option 2 or 3 or whatever it ends up being. But I will say, just personally, as city council and interacting with you, I appreciate the perspective that you bring because you're very student focused. I've never met another school board member. Well, I've only met 2. I'm just kidding. But
High praise.
so vested in the individual students.
Very much.
Like she's taken time to talk to my wife. I don't talk to her because, I'm too aggressive. Julie doesn't like talking to me. No, but my wife's reached out to her, just questions, and you take time out of your day, and you care about the individual students. And so I know what you're proposing isn't some political thing. It's because you're looking for what's best for the students. So I, as a city councilman and as a parent, very much appreciate your efforts.
Thanks. I did just want to mention too, I think with the option 2, the 2-district split, one of the things that you referenced, Michael, is economies of scale. I think one of the things to realize too is we'd be the 4th and 5th largest districts in the state. We wouldn't be small, we'd be smaller. I do think we would retain some economies of scale. Like, for example, if there's a 2-way split, do I imagine us building a warehouse? No, they've got one in Linden. I would, be very happy to access that facility and do the same thing that Provo's doing. Are there going to be some challenges as far as we need to develop service bays for our transportation center? Yes, there are going to be some infrastructure pieces that need to go into place, but I think that we're going to be very, very intentional. And one of the things that's really hard is that all of this is for future boards to decide. We can talk about how we want to make sure that we're putting things in place early, but at the same time, this is future boards. And so what I've told people repeatedly is this isn't just about what I think is best for it long term. You've also got to make sure that you've got quality board members who are running and serving on your school board who are going to continue to take care of students and staff.
So
I'll tell you right now, as long as I'm on the council, you're not putting those service bays at the current transportation center. Because I was fighting that transportation center forever because it's right in the heart of our city. And the last thing we need is to have a industrial shop in the middle of our city. So hopefully there's some places in Eagle Mountain or outside on the outskirts of Saratoga Springs, but that softball field that was supposed to be softball fields and extra practice fields, that's where the new school district's gonna wanna put those, and that's not where I'm going to want that. And that is something the city still has some control over. I am one of 5, but I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm not going to turn the center to have an industrial complex right in the middle of the city.
Well, then we should definitely have a conversation about how to solve that problem long.
Because I was adamant against having that transportation, and they were supposed to be covered. All the buses were supposed to be covered with the cover. Half of them are not. I get its growth. We're trying to do the best we can, but they're already breaking all the rules. Technically, we have a lot of penalties that we could be imposing. We don't. We've worked with the school district. The last thing we need to do is then add more issues to that space.
Yeah, let's figure that one out.
So my last question, you talked about the future boards. If any of these options are voted on in the fall, and let's hypothetically say option 2 is approved, a new board would have to be elected in 2025, right? Can people who are on the Alpine School District Board serve on both boards?
That just got awkward. Yes, it's part of the code that went through. You can serve on an existing board and then a new board that's formed. And so the boards would form in 2025. The new school districts, and all of them would essentially be new school districts, whether it's a 2A or 3A, would start on July 1 of 2027. So there's also a 2-year period of problem solving. So it's not that like, you know, we split and 6 months later we're, you know, it's a long process to make sure we take care of.
So the new board could negotiate with itself
Yes.
in some ways.
So, yeah, so like if you have similar board members
Right.
on a new district negotiating with current board members for some of these pieces, yes. And are there other ways to solve issues? Like, is it something where, like as we're talking about bonding, right? Is there something where we retain, hey, we've got a AAA bond rating, a split happens in 2024. In 2025, do we bond and say that, hey, based on this two-way configuration, we're going to put X amount of dollars here for the west side and X for the east side, and that's going to help everybody kind of start from a perspective of what they need, using that AAA bond rating and economies of scale to try and get a better deal so that everybody starts off not in the, I mean, that's a possibility. So there are other things that can be used to solve problems ongoing as well.
Okay. Thank you for your time this evening.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, reports from the council. Mark, anything from staff?
No, Mayor, there's no need for a closed session.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on the consent items.
So made. Oh, Kevin has his comment.
Oh,
I'll second.
okay, I have a first from Councilman McComber, second from Councilman Carn. Attorney?
We have some requested changes on the TSSD reauthorization contract that came in 3 hours ago.
The material changes?
Do you want us to pull it for the next consent calendar?
Well, we have a deadline to submit our reuse application with the state of March 23rd.
Oh, we can't.
So either discuss those changes later today, or if we could hold a special session.
Let's just hold it to the last item.
We'll pull it out. I'll amend my motion to remove item 5 into the business item.
Second?
I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Wadman?
Aye.
Carn?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barton? Motion passes unanimously. Public hearing, street name change from 145 South to Pony Express Parkway, ordinance 2409.
Mayor and Council, this item, it was brought to us at your request. It will change 45 to Pony Express Parkway. And basically from about 2300 all the way out to the eastern edge of the city.
Okay. Is there anybody here for the public hearing portion? Okay, if you'd like to come up, please avoid repetitive comments. Please state your name and address for the record. Please be respectful in your comments.
I don't know. My name's Ashton Jessup. I'm at 9506 West 350 North, Lehigh. Maybe it's a different discussion. Happy to talk to someone afterwards, but I live off of that road, and I just want to understand implications of the name change is my biggest question.
On it.
In Lehigh or in Saratoga?
I live in Lehigh.
Okay, so we would be changing the name only in Saratoga Springs.
Well, I'm in the county. So,
Can I grab you right after and we can chat?
yeah, I'm just not sure what that means, if that means we're immediately starting to widen the road and what the timeline, infrastructure changes look like, and what the overall impact of that is.
Okay. You'll work with him?
Grab them after the meeting, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else here for public hearings? Okay.
I'm not sure exactly where this falls either, but I live in Saratoga Springs, Willow Glen neighborhood, which is just off of 1100, between 1100 and 1700. There is a charter school also next to my neighborhood, and we fall in this really awkward gray area of Saratoga and Lehigh. So you kind of understand, and Julie, thank you for all your comments. My kids all go to Lehigh schools, and two of them, I have elementary, middle, and high school students at my house. There is no sidewalk between my neighborhood at Willow Glen and 1100. And so luckily, the elementary school and the middle school are picked up right there at my neighborhood. But my high schooler has to go elsewhere. And when they were doing construction, they closed down all of the bus routes there. And so my kids had to go to the neighborhood farther over with no sidewalk. Since then, they've finished the construction and my kids are being bused, most of them. But I've taught my kids, and they're pretty good rule followers, to stick to the side of the road, but not to be in the mud or the bushes. And I've had 3 or 4 times that my kids have come home and said, hey, I almost got hit today, someone down this road. And I'm worried that as we change the name, I've just noticed more and more traffic. So it kind of slowed down as there was the construction going on. But now that the construction's kind of over in that portion, the amount of cars that are coming through just kind of increases. And I'm worried that if we change that name, which is great, I love growth, but if you're gonna change it and you're gonna widen the road, then I'm worried that my kids still don't have that safe passageway. But I don't know who that falls to. I don't know where that sidewalk falls. Is it Saratoga's? Is it Lehigh's? Who do I need to contact in order to make this
It's mostly,
work for my neighborhood?
Did you sign in?
Yes.
Okay. If you could just make a note next to your name, and I will have the Public Works Director reach out to you and answer that question.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Any other comments on the name change? Okay, seeing none, oh,
My name is Devlene, and I live on Hawthorne, which is on the border of Saratoga and Lehigh, and in the Loch Lomond subdivision. And of course, this just came to my attention just recently that they're changing the name. And I'm with this gentleman here. What does that all entail? Are you going to knock out our houses on that street when you widen that road? Or when's the next meeting? So that we can discuss that further?
we'll be widening the road.
okay. Any other comments on the name? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion unless there's discussion from the council.
I think just, we probably need to maybe have some more clear understanding. I mean, Pony Express is a major collector to connect with the Vineyard connector. The reason why Loch Lomond is set off the way it is because it wasn't so that we have really nice, long, big green area. It was because that's to protect the corridor for the road that goes through. The other option is some of our neighbors want to put a bridge across the lake, right on the north shore, right, which doesn't make sense. So I think maybe we could talk, maybe we could do something in the next months or so just to help, maybe have like a meeting where people, the residents can come in to City Hall, we can have some drawings and things, just help educate and make sure you understand what's coming and what we're gonna do. And there will be sidewalks eventually, I don't know exactly the timing, but, so I think that it is a fair concern to have. The safe walking routes, the school district and the cities work together on that, but the schools definitely have to provide a safe walking route or they bus. And that's why they were busing. Obviously, when there was construction, the buses couldn't get there. So there was some, obviously, things that had to work around that. But definitely, you have your school board member here and you have the city council. So it's a good time to make that kind of comment because I saw her taking note as well on that. So thanks.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve public hearing item 1 as stated on the agenda.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden.
I'll second it.
I have a second from Councilwoman Barton. Any further discussion? Carn?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Barton?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wadman?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Business item 1, naming for city parks.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So we actually have 2 parks that have come online in the last year that need to be named so we can get them added to the facility. Oh, I don't know how to use this.
I do not
Just
want
kidding. All right, so our first one is on Mount Saratoga Boulevard. I'm not the most creative person, so trying to kind of figure out what's the best. I actually think that Mount Saratoga Park is the best name for this park for a few reasons. One is that there's actually a misconception that it's an Eagle Mountain. And in fact, I was given the information later that someone actually held like a soccer camp there and was advertising that it was an Eagle Mountain Park, and, you know, because they didn't even recognize it was in Saratoga. So I feel like having Saratoga in the name, it really kind of like, this is a Saratoga Springs Park. I know that we try to avoid to naming things after a subdivision.
because they take ownership of it.
For sure, but
The perfect example.
that mount or that hill is Mount Saratoga, right? And so,
But it's not named Mount Saratoga on the GIS map. That's the name of a development on the mountain. The mountain actually isn't called Mount
okay, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I just know other things that were named Mount Saratoga after it. So anyway, that's kind of mine. But there are a few other names. Sage Ridge, that's actually the name of a street that's a cross street there. Because sometimes we've done that, like with Pinnacle Park. And then if we are against Mount Saratoga Park, I like the name High Ridge better.
What about
but
like
that's just,
Saratoga Ridge?
we totally could.
I like the idea of it being known as Saratoga. Mm-hmm. I don't like the idea of it being named after
After
development. Maybe Saratoga. Ridge.
Saratoga Ridge Park.
I like that.
Nikki's like primed to change the resolution. So you guys tell us, like, you know me, I am not picky.
Argument was valid.
Yes, I like the name. And so that does kind of put the name in it. Saratoga Ridge, it is on a ridge.
It is. It's a beautiful park.
I would prefer Karn Memorial Park.
Every time we name a park.
Only if there's a statue.
Park has grass. That wouldn't be representative.
Oh.
They're gonna put an old folks home there?
All right, so
I actually really like Saratoga Ridge as well, for those same reasons. We still have Saratoga in there, but it's not named after the development itself.
I have no opinion.
Okay.
Whatever.
I have no opinion.
I don't.
I like the Saratoga Ridge as well. I think that.
okay, that's 3, right? So
Yep.
that means
Yep.
it wins. Okay,
Saratoga Ridge.
Saratoga Ridge.
Let's get a monument put on it so
Let's get a monument.
let's get a monument on it so it doesn't turn like Triangle Park from Hamster Wheel Park or whatever back and forth as.
Okay. I will work with Rick to get that done. So then the next one is along Mountain View Corridor. It's kind of across the street, but you have to take a jaunt from where Fitness Park is, the Fitness Trail Park, up above like Grandview.
By Fitness Park.
The benches, that's correct. And so, again, just kind of trying to think of one. I actually liked Foothill Park because that was originally Foothill, Mountain View Corridor. And there's nothing that kind of commemorates that. And it's on a foothill. And so it kind of seemed to make sense to me.
I kind of like your Shadow Ridge because there again, you're up on the hill looking off into the valley.
Definitely. So, and there's actually a road called Mountain Shadow. It's kind of on the corner of the two. And so I took this shadow from that. But again, it's kind of, so Shadow Ridge.
Sure. I don't care.
Whatever.
Shadow Ridge, I like Shadow Ridge.
Okay, you got to,
Okay, so
Three for Shadow
Mountain Ridge and
Ridge.
Shadow Ridge. All right, we got winners?
Saratoga Ridge.
Saratoga Ridge.
Saratoga Ridge. I'll get it right when I make the facility page on the website tomorrow.
okay.
Perfect.
Just for my
Thank you.
education.
I will enter,
Mayor, can I?
we- yeah.
What is, when we name the parks, I mean, there'll be a little thing that says, welcome to the park. Any other cost or anything to renaming a park? I'm just
Not
curious.
renaming it.
these are new.
Just naming it.
Yeah, these ones just barely came online this year
Okay,
from
okay.
development.
But the other cost would be anything is just registering it with the map system.
And then, we'll have to put signage with the park rules.
Perfect.
Owen,
Thank you.
1 second. Where are you blinking? None of yours are blinking.
We bring him.
Is there? Oh, there you go. You started.
Okay, just for the council's remember, to help the council remember, previous councils have asked us to bring, when we have a new park coming online, naming requests rather than staff just do it. So we'll continue doing that until you tell us otherwise, but
We're going to do this.
to your point, there's no difference other than us putting a name on it and then you know, when they apply, they sometimes name it themselves, but we, as a city, get to, if they turn it over to us, get to have the official name. So,
And I'm again only 1 out of 5 votes, but I prefer not to list my name at the park on a plaque.
Oh,
You can leave his name off then, that's fine.
thanks.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, do we need a motion on that one? Are we good?
Well, it is a business.
Council in the park was named.
So yes, I'll entertain a motion.
Always saying that you don't want the raise. I hate it when you.
Okay. Entertaining a motion.
I'll move to someone else. I don't remember the name.
I move that we approve business item 1, naming of city parks located on Mount Saratoga Boulevard and Loveland Lane, Mountain Shadow Lane, Resolution R2418, naming the parks Saratoga Ridge and Mountain Ridge.
Shadow Ridge.
Shadow Ridge, sorry, Shadow Ridge. I wrote it down wrong.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Carn. I have a second from Councilman Wadman. Any further discussion? Wadman,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Carn.
I,
Motion passes unanimously. Business item 2, amendments to Title 19 Land Development Code.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have before you a proposal that staff drafted related to definitions for bars and taverns. At a previous meeting, we had heard concerns over the uses allowed in the bar definition. We're proposing to address those concerns. And then we also added a brand-new definition for tavern to separate that from bar. And the main separation is a bar would have a full food menu where a tavern would not. And then what staff is proposing is that the tavern not be allowed in any zones. However, of course, that's up for discussion. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
This is more for Kevin. Are we okay defining something and not allowing it in any zone? Because like previous things, I don't even want to say the acronym.
SOB.
SOB, I'm not swearing for anyone in the audience. Like we have to allow it in the industrial zone, or at least somewhere, right? Would that be the similar case here?
No.
Okay.
Short answer. No, there's a few cases that talk about sexually oriented businesses and that it is a First Amendment issue, and that's why you have to allow it in one zone in the city. But that's up for you to decide if you want, if there's some zones you're comfortable taverns going, then that's an opportunity to make that part of your motion.
I will just say, we don't have any coming forth right now, so I'm fine with it not being anywhere, and that can be left up to the future. It just seemed, since we had to allow one, I just didn't understand why. I wanted to make sure we were allowed to not put it anywhere.
so business item 2, all we are doing is changing these two
We're just creating the.
just creating the definitions. Perfect.
Go back to the definitions, is that right?
I did have one question on this. What is the difference? For bar, it says you have to be 21. No one under 21 is allowed. Where, is that how it is? Where at like,
No.
Yes.
About time, yeah.
about time? Okay, all right. They haven't carded me in a long time, so I
About time you can't.
didn't know, didn't know if I could go in or not. Okay, I'll make a motion if you.
Well, just one more question on 309, the tavern description. I think, does the state distinguish anything like that? Did we try to mirror what they do, or is that just what we came up with?
This is a blend of what's in our business license section and what's in state code.
The main difference is the bar definition says they have to have a full menu available. The state is not that restrictive with the definition of a bar. It just says they have to have food as an option for purchase.
If they have
Now,
pretzel.
they could have like pretzels and, yeah, I don't know what they would have, but not a full menu. This is why this, and we're okay, it's okay to be more restrictive in our code, because that's a zoning issue.
And About Time does have a full.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question for Sarah as well. So I know the planning commission for the negative recommendation for this, and I'm trying to think back because I was there for that. Was it, they didn't like the difference between the two definitions, or was it the food? There was such a long discussion, I can't remember what the negative, what was their main concern with the two definitions?
There was a lot of discussion. There was different opinions on what a bar was versus what a tavern was and
right.
how we're defining it. However, our definitions are in
Matches the
coordination
state.
with the state law, or with state code, and also with our business license section. It's true that these are probably defined very differently in different parts of the country. However, this is in coordination with how Utah code is defining things. It doesn't exactly match it. As Kevin said, we are being more restrictive here, but we are coordinating with our business license section and state code.
So they just didn't like
Their
the.
concerns were the wording. They didn't
Okay,
like the wording.
that's what I thought.
They thought we could probably have more categories. That is a big discussion. State code does have a lot of categories in addition to this. However, with the goals that we have in allowing sports bars, but not establishments that have that don't have full food menus, this will accomplish the goals that we're looking for.
And we could always change this in the future if we have other uses that come somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Right, we certainly can, and that was part of the planning commission's discussion as well. What if we have something else that's a hybrid of these?
Yeah.
But then if we do get something like that, it would be appropriate to bring it here for discussion.
Yep.
Thanks.
I'll entertain that motion. Councilman Carn.
Sure, I move to approve. I just did the last one. Business item 2, amendments to Title 19, as stated on the agenda with any staff findings and conditions.
I have a first from Councilman Carn,
Second?
second from Councilwoman Barton. Any further discussion? Barton,
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Wadman.
Aye.
Carn.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Business item 3.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have another code amendment here today. The applicant is present, representing the DKBK, the Break Sports Grill. They have proposed an amendment to the distance between bars as part of the bar regulations in 1905. They are proposing to reduce the distance from a half mile to 1,000 feet in a straight line. This is just an example of what a 1,000-foot buffer from property line out would look like, and a half-mile buffer from their current location, 127 West Lake Drive. On the right, you've seen this buffer before at the last council meeting for the last code amendment. On the left, I added some analysis of the general plan area. So this is probably the only area that has regional commercial that we didn't look at last time. Most of that is actually owned by UDOT for highway expansion at this point in time. And then with the residential buffer, assuming that the high-density residential is put in where it's indicated on the general plan, there's a tiny corner there in the middle between the yellow, green, and blue that would potentially allow a bar, but that is outside the half-mile distance from the break lot, so it is unaffected. That area is unaffected by the proposed code amendment. And that is all I have. The applicant is present. They have requested to give a presentation if you should choose.
Can I just ask a question? I know we've got 2 businesses looking. One's been doing it for 2 years. Have they even pulled a permit yet?
No, the site plan is coming on the next council
But if
meeting.
these guys already had a site plan and pulled a permit, it would be the other business trying to get in, right?
We didn't know what would be in there, so it was a multi-tenant building.
The challenge with what you just described is the first one identified themselves and the second one didn't. So the first one, About Time identified on their site plan application and on their plans that they were About Time. The other one came in and on the site plan said tenant space. So we've been asked the question, which came first? Well, the first ones that identified themselves in a formal application was About Time.
I guess it's just taken them 2 years to do anything.
Right, they have had some challenges. However, they are so close.
And they moved locations.
They did, in some negotiations with the property owner, they did end up having to move one lot to the south from their original location.
Okay. Councilman Wilden? Sorry.
Well, I'm going to have the same question that we did on the other areas before. Now, we're talking about making the code change for one business, just like we did before, that impacts the entire city. I don't see in here, if we shrink the distance to 1,000 foot or whatever it is, the areas that it can go. I'm not just concerned about residential now, it's just high clustering. What does that do to the capacity of like how much we can bring on? And we need to treat this business consistent like we do like other ones where we don't want huge clustering. I'm not willing to vote on it when I don't know what that does to the city. So I mean, that's just when something comes where we're changing the code, we need to see the broader impact, at least we need to vote on it. Does that make sense?
And that is what we are trying to accomplish with the maps that you're seeing here, that there would be one additional spot in the center here. So that is
Oh, I just missed it.
what we are proposing. That is the information.
That was a very nice
that weird-
way of saying, Councilman Wilden, you idiot, you missed it.
Weird
So.
geometric shape.
Okay, I thought that was like focused on the residential stuff.
Right,
Okay.
this graphic
That
is
spot.
All the
intending.
Only spot that it would.
Okay, I got it.
And it doesn't, nothing really fits there.
So it literally only makes it so that we can put one more in if we do the 1,000 feet.
Correct. Yeah, looking at this analysis from 1,000 to half-mile buffer, if the bout time goes in where they have proposed, and if this goes in, that takes up everything in this regional commercial area. The other buffers and the other regional commercial parts of the city remain the
Farther than that
same.
anyway.
So the only additional area would be that potential triangle on the
Little
left.
blue piece right there.
So in the other regional commercials, like in the southern end of the city, they'd only be able to have one.
Right, it hasn't changed, yeah. There's no distance. They would not be able to have two in any other regional commercial area of the city with the residential distance.
Yeah, so that would stop them from, yeah.
They're more than.
In the southern end, they wouldn't be able to have any because of the proximity to.
Yeah,
But
that's.
this is literally, the reason why this code amendment is happening is because they want to put 2 bars within 1,000 feet of each other.
Correct.
So it could technically happen on the south end of the city along Mountain View corridor at some point
Yes.
in those regional commercial zones that aren't established yet.
Well, they're kind of narrow, so what we looked at last time, they were too narrow and too close to residential to have a bar and.
Okay, all right.
So just to throw this out with it, you know, to Councilman Wilden's point, we don't know how this affects the rest of the cities that's being built. You know, could this just, the shorter distance be limited to the gateway overlay zone only?
The challenge is that
Overlay?
this area is not in the gateway
gateway
overlay.
Oh, it's just out of it,
Yeah,
isn't
the
it?
gateway overlays are on the edges.
It's on the edges. But from what we're looking at, because of where residential is, the rest of the city wouldn't qualify.
Not for a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
Not in- yeah.
We have 2 areas in the southern part of the city that are zoned regional commercial. One of those is near Ring Road, and then one of those is further south in the Fox Hollow development. And both of those areas would be too close to residential to qualify.
Right. I'm talking about future RC zone along Mountain View corridor as that's built out.
Right.
We could have future RC zone there, right?
That's correct. If at any point in the future we were to rezone, so we evaluated the current zoning general plan. However, if any point in the future we were to do a rezone that doesn't, and these parameters, you know, we would need to evaluate the parameters, the distances, to see if they could go there or
Because we can
not.
always change it, but then these would be grandfathered in. We could always make the distance
Right.
larger again if there's a problem, but this would be grandfathered in if we make the change today.
Right, and when we do a rezone, sometimes we do development agreements and limit uses. So that's also something to think about. It's not our preference to do it that way, but it is, if we do rezone something in the future, we would have to consider these distances.
Okay.
So I know there is a difference, but I don't see a huge difference between this use and a Chili's. You walk in, you have food, you have some drinks. I'm fine with this.
I am too. Actually, especially because I just feel like both locations are good locations for something like this. I mean, like Home Depot, that's a great spot for this. So I'm okay with it.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion then.
I've made too many.
I'll do it. I move to approve the proposed amendments to Title 19 with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
Okay, I have a first from Councilwoman Barton,
Second.
second from Councilman Wadman. It's rookie night. Any further discussion?
I'd like to know when the applicant's gonna open their doors.
Come on up.
Soon's not an answer. I can't get onion rings in soon.
I don't believe they've asked. It's a legislative decision, and, yeah, they're about to vote on it.
Oh,
We have a motion.
They have a motion.
sorry, just a second.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Hang tight.
It's subject
Hang tight.
to, it's subject to the mayor's discretion. You could
we'll-
hear from them if you'd like.
Finish the motion, and then would love to have an answer to the question. Okay, so I have first and a second. Wadman?
Aye.
Carn?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Comber? Aye. Barton?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I
Okay.
would love an answer, sorry.
So is your building up yet?
Getting framed right now.
No, you're the framed one out front of Home Depot.
Just
Okay.
at the podium.
So you're probably 6 months at
mean-
least, right?
We're hoping this summer.
How good
so
is your burger? I love
It's
burgers.
delicious.
You guys,
Good enough to go in the airport.
no, you guys, I've been to the break quite a few times and their food is delicious. So if you
Is it
guys,
South Jordan?
It's Daybreak, and then there's one West Valley, I think, as well.
West Valley, Murray, downtown,
Murray,
and then
yeah.
going in the airport.
So,
Excited.
Yeah, it's excellent food.
Yep. Okay,
Great.
Perfect, so this summer.
Yes.
Okay.
hopefully. Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, have a
We have-
ribbon cutting.
Make sure you
Yes,
make sure you have
we
a
will.
ribbon cutting.
For sure.
We get it on
Can you
our
name
social
it?
media for you and
Name a burger after a Carn Memorial Burger.
He's trying to name everything
Extra
after me
meat.
tonight.
because your attitude around the city.
It'd be a burger without a bun on top.
Yeah.
Any other questions I can answer?
No, we're,
Thanks, you guys.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.
There's a real demand.
Thank you very much.
The Carney burger.
Oh, that would have been.
You can thank me for the liquor store. in Saratoga Springs. That was me. And the reason why is because I wanted the sales tax revenue in our city.
Okay. Perfect, thank
you.
you. Amendments
luck.
to Title 19 Land Development Code.
Oh yeah. I know.
We have another code amendment for you. This is related to municipal buildings and facilities. This amendment proposes a definition for those uses, which are buildings specifically for municipal uses in Saratoga Springs. And then we are proposing a height increase in the institutional civic zone from 50 feet to 75 feet. And then we are proposing some exemptions for municipal buildings related to loading areas and screening those. And I apologize if letter A is confusing. That confused the Planning Commission a little bit because they said, why are we exempting that from everything? But that is also covered in 7B. So we are still required to do screening. We are just allowing the pickup area to be between the building and the street.
Okay. Any further questions from the council?
Just my only question, I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit on item 5, but there's so many can compliance. This actually fixes all those can complies, right? Most of them.
Well, it fixes 2 of the areas where it didn't meet the code. The other can comply staff will be reviewing it with the building plan set.
All right.
Once the final plan set is ready.
Right, okay.
Okay.
No questions.
I will entertain a motion.
That we approve business item 4 as stated on the agenda with any staff findings and conditions.
Second.
A first from McComber, second from Wilden. Any further discussion?
I'd like to third it.
Barton?
Aye.
Comber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Carn?
Aye.
Wadman?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. City Hall and Library Site Plan.
Okay, so this is the City Hall site plan. This is a formal site plan approval process, so it went to Planning Commission last week. Did give a favorable recommendation for this.
That's good. Hopefully the applicant wasn't difficult.
No, they were a pleasure to work with along the way.
Austin, don't suck up to the council. Happy comment.
Don't tell lies about Mark.
Okay, well, so here's the building, 319 South Saratoga Road, IC zone. It's adjacent to Patriot Park. I think it's important to point out here that this is all going to be part of a city campus, so we already have the police and Court there. We have the Patriot Park, and then there will be future, other city future developments there. So it's all part of one campus. Here's the site plan. You can see we have adequate landscaping, and there's 175 parking stalls. The building is about 76,000 square feet. On the east side there, you'll see that's where the drop-off is located. Again, landscaping meets requirements in our code. These are some elevations of the building. The elevations also now will meet our code. As mentioned, there are a number of can complies in the staff report, and so those will be addressed with the building permit set. And then the other ones where it didn't meet the code, those have that our code has now been changed. So staff recommends approval of this. I don't know if you have any questions.
Any questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I will move that we approve business item 5 as stated on the agenda, including any staff findings and conditions.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden,
Second.
second from Councilman Wadman. Any further discussion? Barton?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wadman?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Karn?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have no need for closed session. I will adjourn the meeting. Oh, we got to do number 5. We kicked it to the end.
What?
Oh, yeah.
TSSD. Mr. Attorney, take it away.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Have to do that.
he forgot it. We're done.
We have your item.
I was hoping that we could just ignore that. These last minute changes came in from TSSD, but yeah, let me save that really quick to Common Drive and we can pull that up, so.
While he's doing that, let me explain real quickly what this reuse issue is. TSSD discharges its cleaned water back to Utah Lake. They can only discharge a certain number of phosphates and other things into the lake from a volume standpoint. Rather than spend money on very costly upgrades and also annual treatment costs, which is many, I want to say like $1 million or something like that. I could be wrong, but in treating that water to a lower level to get the phosphates out, which is, one of the algal bloom issues that we see at Utah Lake. They could take that water, and we, by right, can reuse that water as part of our reuse plans. But they would take it and they would basically pump it back to cities that have secondary water systems. So instead of discharging it to the lake, they would send it back to us, and we could just
So
plug
we would
that.
have less salty water to water our lawns with.
We would actually, it's actually high.
And it would have phosphates that would be good for our plants.
This is great.
Think of it as your IFA water.
Every year we get complaints about the alkali.
So, but the point of the project is that it would save us a lot of money as a sewer district by not building this structure and then spending money to treat it. And even more important is, as a city, instead of us having to take the water and pump it back from the lake into our system, it would be provided to us at our pressure zone sites.
Which is great.
So, which saves us capital money. So in the long run, it's really the best thing. Now, there are some issues that we're working through. This contract will let us go forward and continue to pursue the reuse permit with the state and other things. There are some tricky issues that we'll bring back to you at another time. Typically, we're able to deplete our water rights. Right now, the state is wanting us to replace those water rights and send additional water to the Great Salt Lake, which means that there's no benefit in us reusing our water, which we feel is probably a concern that we're going to want to address. And so we're working with TSSD, other cities, and trying to sort this out with the state. This agreement lets us move to the next step. It does not commit us necessarily.
Makes sense not to pump it out of the aquifer, because you were saying the Sweetwater wells are starting to pull junk water from Cedar Valley into
Right.
the Sweetwater wells. This would allow the aquifers to stay fuller.
The theory is how can we recharge the aquifers as opposed to pumping water to send down to the Great Salt Lake, depleting the aquifers. So there's all kinds of interesting and very
Using
complex.
our water solves some of it.
Reusing our water. We already have authorization to reuse our water and deplete it. The challenge is can we get it back to our city via this reuse project as opposed to having to take it from the lake or someplace else. So those are the issues that we're still working through, but this would allow us to continue that process. Kevin indicated we've got some language changes that came last minute, but as a TSSD board member, we are interested in pursuing this because it helps the board, which then passes those savings along to our residents. It's good for us, it's good for the environment, it's good for not draining the aquifers. There's a lot of great reasons for it, but this agreement is something that we need to have in place.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll see the red lines up on the screen. Page 1, it's mostly just cleanup and really not that big of a deal. If you go to page 2, it'll show more of the changes, and I think these are good changes. Kind of describes what we're doing here a little bit better. It's hard for me to go through all of these because, like I said, they came in a few minutes.
Kevin, are these non-material changes?
No, these look like they're more.
I would say that there's a couple that I'm not quite a few that I'm not concerned with. The only one that I'm concerned with is this statement here in recital J. And if you can go to page 3.
J, there it is.
It's the new J. There's some language in here that says that we're returning approximately 43.5% of the reuse water to the underground aquifer. I think generally that's kind of what the science has shown, and the engineers basically are stating that typically happens. But the reuse water that we're applying to be able to use or reuse is actually part of our allowable depletion. So water law in Utah, you're allowed to divert a certain amount and you're allowed to deplete a certain amount. That means we have to send a certain amount of the water has to go back to the aquifer. The portion that we're using for the reuse water is the portion of the water that we're not required to send back to the aquifer. We can use all of it, theoretically, under the law. So the fact that we're committing to return an additional amount of the water that we're already allowed to deplete it, use it all. That's my concern, is that we have this language in here. So I just wanted to soften the language and say something like, it's anticipated that this application would return approximately 43.5% of the water.
So it's not a shall, it's more like a may.
Yeah, and it probably already does that with the recital, but I don't know why we're getting super specific with that clause.
To the 10th.
That's the language to tell the engineer, the state engineer's office, not to commit with TSSD that will do.
I would encourage the council to make the motion, but for item J, allow Kevin and Mark to make final tweaks to the wording.
That's, yeah.
So we're not doing it right here. I would be comfortable with that.
And I'm actually agreeing with you. I don't think we should be committing to a number or, let's make it more.
And just so we go through let's just go through the exercise of looking at the rest of the, I think it's fine. In fact, this section 2, if you keep going down, Sarah, is actually really good because it already said this, but it just makes it clear that this isn't giving TSSD any ownership in our water, that we're retaining ownership of those water rights. So I think that's good. And then 5 and 6 are fine as well.
Now, in theory, getting it back to us, we just pump more out of our South Marina? Say we're pulling it from TSSD across the lake?
So there are those
that
would like to argue that as soon as it's discharged back to the lake, it becomes
Salt Lake
someone else's
County's.
water. However, we've already been approved for full depletion and reuse of this water in many of our water rights, just not from the TSSD source. So what we want to be sure of is that we're not entering into some sort of interaction or transaction that somehow loses us water that we have to then buy new water rights to replace our current existing water rights. So we think that this could be an issue. We'll look for all of the necessary changes, but
But to avoid the discharge phosphates, it's going to have to be piped back to us.
It would
when
have to be
gets
piped back to us, because if it gets put into the lake, then.
Which would keep it cleaner anyways for us.
Right, and again, it's ironic, you see the water coming out of the treatment facility and it's clear, and then as soon as it gets into Utah Lake, there's.
Turbid.
It churns and turns back into the murky Utah Lake color, so.
This was really helpful for me as well when Mark explained this, because that's true. I think Plan B would be to take it from the Marina Pump Station if we had to. But this reuse application would allow us to service Zone 1. And so that's why it's beneficial, this
Not
application.
clogging our filters anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not on.
Good thing to do, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
so.
And
it
we're
make
allowed to do
better
it.
sovereign
Statute.
citizens, yeah.
Have
exactly.
always been allowed to do this. I mean, this version of the statute's been around a long time.
So the challenge is that there was a bill that was passed in the legislature last year saying, hey, we're gonna put a moratorium, or we're gonna stop these reuse applications. You have to get your applications in, and you have to go through this process. We're into that process. TSSD has identified this, and we've included our water shares as part of that discussion, because, again, if we can get the reused water piped back to us at elevation Zone 1 pressures, that's a good thing for us. And so right now, there's just some maneuvering that is making it difficult, because we don't want to give up water rights to solve the Great Salt Lake problem if it's a taking from us.
Are we getting credit for all the water that's going up the Jordan River right now? The Jordan River is fuller than I've seen it in 5 years.
Yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of politics associated with the Great Salt Lake and tributaries and.
Well, because we're not pulling into the canals yet. All that water is going to the Great Salt.
We're only allowed to use our canal water from April 15th through October. So that's,
So all this water, because it's above the dams at the pump station, all the water's flowing.
They're releasing water, I believe they're releasing water in anticipation of spring runoff.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's good, it's gonna help, but
Well, Utah Lake's at 115%.
yeah, at times, we see legislation in response to a specific condition without understanding that, you know, things.
At times.
All right, I'm trying to be generous, let's not pick fights, but this bill is one of those ones that we hope will be a good thing for the health and safety of Utah Lake.
another thing to discuss or just point out really quickly is we're one of the few cities that actually keep track of our depletion and meter that. And it feels very, for lack of a better word, I was going to say something else, but it's very frustrating that this depletion is an issue now, because we've been very proactive with that. So if I may, the motion, if you can just reference this 43.5% language to either soften it or remove it altogether in your motion, that would be great.
Councilman Karn is itching to make the motion.
Well, we're talking about too long. I move to approve consent items 5, TSSD reuse authorization contract, resolution R2430 dated today, giving the city manager with the input of the city attorney negotiation authority to finalize the agreement. Is that good enough?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Karn.
I'll second.
I have a second from Councilwoman Barton. Any further discussion? Comber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Wadman?
Aye.
Barton?
Aye.
Karn?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.